down the road sold a property for, you know, 5 million, and you might be able to sell yours for 5.1 million, or you might be able to sell 4.9 million. It's sort of like, it's all based on what has happened in the past. And it's not like it's a commoditized sort of market or environment, particularly in these suburbs of Sydney. It's a specialty sort of market, and the vendor's agent sort of builds expectations of the vendor, and based on the amount of properties available, and the buyer's agent starts to build the expectations of the buyer. So to some extent, between vendor's agents and buyer's agents, which is you guys determine the market price. So if you're reading the newspaper, not you in particular, but if a vendor's agent's reading the newspaper and getting spooked by what the commentators are saying about interest rates and affordability and, you know, price of gas and cost of living and World War III or whatever they're talking about, they can condition their vendor pretty quickly. Or am I correct, or do you think that vendors have a view and they're pretty solid, they can't be conditioned by their agent?
It just depends on their motivation as well. I mean, it's a lot easier to condition a vendor who's bought and who has to sell, as opposed to just someone who wants to test the market, and if they get a crazy price, they're sellers. And that happened a lot during COVID. There was a lot of that because the market was so hot, and, you know, it was a seller's market. There were a lot of people just putting their property in the market to go, okay, I want to get a crazy price. Like, if we get it, let's go. Now it just comes down to motivation. But yeah, I mean, it definitely, the agents will use anything they can, you know, just like we would use negative media, you know, in negotiations. I mean, the agents
with
are
the
using
agent, with the buyer, with the vendor's
with
agent.
the vendor, correct, with the vendor's agents.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, they'll do the same on their side.
Is that sort of the genesis of the buyer's agents as an industry? It's like, I mean, 20 years ago, no one had ever heard of a buyer's agent. And there are a couple running around the place, but they're trying to establish the reason why they're valuable. And now, obviously, they are very valuable. Is that why your buyer's agency industry has emerged as a really strong industry? Because vendors' agents will sort of wind them up about prices? Is it about being rational towards
It's a mixture of that and also getting access to more stock. I mean, a lot of property actually trades off market. So if you're just jumping on domain or realestate.com, you're probably seeing half of what could be out there.
Really? Half?
Yeah, around 50% it trades off market or pre-market. So, you know, it's about getting access to everything. And especially if you're like a first home buyer, or it's, you know, transacting on property is not something you do very often. It's quite daunting. It's quite scary to know, okay, am I being taken for a ride here? Like, what is the true value of this property? If you're, you know, don't know the area that well, you've really got to do your research. You've really got to say, okay, well, these properties were all sold around this price, so it means this property could be worth this. And that's what a good buyer's agent will do. They'll have all the information about what's sold off market, how many buyers are on a certain property. They'll know what stock's going to go well, what stock's going to sell at a certain level, and they'll come up with the value of a property. So you know, okay, I'm investing wisely and I'm paying what the market value is, or, you know, if they're a great, you know, negotiator, maybe even something better. Yeah,
in your game, in the buyer's agent's game, are you mostly acting for or representing people who want to buy a home for themselves, like own and occupy, or are you representing investors as well?
Both. I've bought for, you know, quite a few investors.
And of those two markets at the moment, that is June 2022, where have you seen a change or any shift in demand? Are the investors all of a sudden working out it's a really good time to buy, or the owner-occupiers still more prevalent than the investors?
There's actually been a lot of investors coming back at the moment. I mean, vacancy rates are down to, I think, 1.6%, which is, you know, the lowest they've been in a while. Rents are increasing. So while interest rates are increasing and, you know, your mortgage repayments might be increasing, you know, rents are also increasing. So if you're investing in property, it sort of evens itself out. So there's definitely a lot of investors, and, you know, they might see now as an opportunity. I mean, I think there's good deals around. So if you are looking to buy and invest, you know, you'd be looking now in the next couple of months to see what happens and to get into the market, especially if you're going to hold a property for a long time. I would say if you're looking to buy something as an investment, but maybe flip it in a year or two, probably not the best time to buy now, because there's a lot of sort of uncertainty and the market might come off sort of 5 or 10%. But if you're looking to buy something, get a good tenant, get a good, you know, rental, and then hold it for the next 5 or 10 years, I think there's good opportunity around.
So you're in the east suburbs area, which is sort of like pretty ritzy in terms of pricing. Probably doesn't represent all of Sydney. Definitely doesn't represent all of Australia. If if you're on the monopoly board and you've got land on a community chest and they just said, look, collect $2 million, where would you buy now? Would you buy in Sydney Metro or would you buy regional? What would you do with the $2 million? A young Tammy now.
I would try to buy something in the eastern suburbs.
Why is that?
I just think, in terms of a capital growth point of view, if you can, get something, I would look to be buying something unique. Obviously, if you could get like a terrace of some sort, great, because you're getting a bit of land.
Let's say $3 million. Could you buy in Paddington?
$3 million, yeah, you can buy in Paddington. You could probably get something, one just sold actually with parking for $3,080,000, which I thought was a great buy. If you could get a terrace in Paddington with parking, absolute ideal. Put tenants in, it's great capital growth, good little land holding, and obviously they're not building any more terraces, so you're buying something unique. Wouldn't advise to be buying something in an area, that's dense with a lot of high rises, because your property is not as unique. You always kind of look for unique properties.
Yeah, and in terms of unique, you and two others are on. I'm not sure exactly whether it's just two others, but are on that TV show, that great series called Luxe Listings. How's that been?
It's been great.
Yeah,
it's been very good.
How many episodes have you done?
Oh, I think 12. There's been 2 seasons of 6 episodes each.
Right. So you've been on the you've done 12 episodes.
12 eps, and there is a season 3 coming out as well.
And have you filmed that yet?
We have.
Yeah, and your co-hosts, who are they?
So it's mainly Simon Cohen, who owns Cohen Handler, Gavin Deline, and Monica too.
Yep.
And then a couple of the agents around them as well.
And then how do you all interact? I mean, what's the process? So like, are you going around to buyers and saying to buyers, this is what you should buy? I mean, what are you doing on the show? Tell me about the show.
They pretty much just showcase Sydney in its best light, and they showcase all the luxe properties and all the different sort of dramas that go along with us trying to buy and them trying to sell, and the different relationships and dynamics with their vendors and our clients. So it's just like a Hollywood, I guess, spotlight on the eastern suburbs real estate.
It's a good way to showcase Sydney, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I watch the show and I'm just like, wow, like Sydney is incredible. I can't imagine if you were like living overseas and you'd never been to Australia, you would just look at Sydney and go, wow, I want to go there. It looks amazing. Well,
when you see properties for sale in New York at $35 million US for an apartment, or 3 apartments, people go, wow, that doesn't exist in Sydney. Well, it does. We do get properties sold for that sort of money here in Australia.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And what do you think, if I don't mind asking you for a bold prediction, is going to happen between here and the next 12 months? Do you think, and I don't mean just in your zone, these suburbs, I just mean Australia-wide. Like I don't mean every part of Australia, but just Australia-wide. On average, people are predicting, commentators are predicting, economists are predicting, on average, a drop between 10 and 15% of house prices or property prices, dwelling prices. It's not just houses, it's apartments, houses, townhouses, etc. And that's not just Sydney, that's all metro plus regional areas as well. What do you think? I mean, what's your gut feeling is going to happen if interest rates do go up to, increase by another 1.5%?
Of course. I've been listening to a couple of economists lately, and they're predicting some pretty dire things to happen. I mean, the market is going to dip as a whole. This is generally speaking. Obviously, I mainly focus on the eastern suburbs, and that's generally a bubble in itself. Whatever happens around the rest of Australia, sometimes it's a bit more of a buoyant market, but I definitely think it's going to come off a bit. Especially, different suburbs around Australia. But bear in mind, we're up sort of 20% over the last 2 years in terms of growth. So if it does come off sort of 10, 15%, most people who've bought in the 2 years prior, they're still relatively even out or maybe even up a little bit depending on what they bought. But I do think there will be a dip. There's obviously going to be, everyone's anticipating all the rises. Our interest rates have been historically low. It's the first increase we've had in 10 years. So I think a lot of people are scared. Once it starts happening, people will stop freaking out a bit. It'll just become the norm. And, as long as you're your job's good, your job's stable, and your serviceability is fine, then you'll still be looking at buying. There'll still be a lot of activity, and I think there'll just be price adjustments.
And in the east suburbs, in the area that you are specialising in, when you say there's to be lots of activity, do you see, though, within these suburbs, areas where there'll be more activity and areas where there'll be less activity? So in other words, let's say take Randwick compared to Vaucluse. Randwick's much more affordable than Vaucluse. Are you thinking that the affordable areas like Randwick will start to outperform in terms of activity places like Vaucluse?
Yes, there's more supply there in terms of dwellings, like apartments and houses, as opposed to Vaucluse is generally quite tightly held. And unless people have a compelling reason to sell or to trade, as in like they're upsizing or downsizing, they might just ride the wave out. If there's no, like I said, no compelling reason for them to sell, they'll probably just hold on to their property. So the market will get a little bit tighter.
And that's the point. People have been enjoying low interest rates for a long time. A lot of them are ahead of their schedule. A lot of the people, particularly your clients, a lot of the people who are vendors for the types of clients a lot of people who are vendors in Vaucluse or various other parts of these suburbs, they've probably had the home for a long time. So they're way ahead in terms of value. There's a lot of equity sitting in the property. They're ahead on their repayments. They probably borrowed a little bit of money because they bought it so long ago. If they don't have to sell, they're not going to sell. So we're not going to see a flood of properties on the marketplace.
No.
The only people who are going to sell in those environments are a few people who might have to sell. They might have come upon bad times. But a few others might be saying, well, hang on, if I sell now, I'm going to buy something cheaper. So downsizes, because they're going to buy proportionally the same cheaper rate when they're downsizing. So you probably, I expect we're going to have the situation where we're going to have a dysfunctional market where there's no willing buyer and a willing seller. There's the willing buyer, but the willing seller's not there. The willing seller's saying, no, not selling for that price. Don't have to sell. Not interested.
Sit back.
Just going to sit back and wait till this all just rolls through and see what happens at the end of 18 months' time. Because a lot of those vendors don't have to sell, which means you have a mismatch. You have hungry buyers wanting to pay what they can afford, but the vendors just say, nah, not selling. Go buy somewhere else. So maybe what will happen, if those buyers want to buy and they can't buy in your zone, do you expect them to sort of say, look, I can't buy in these suburbs, I can't buy in Maroubra, I can't buy in Coogee, I can't buy in Randwick. Maybe I should go and buy out of the area. Do you think those buyers might say, I mean, you've had some experience with these people, are they likely to say, let's go and buy in Balmain for argument's sake?
It's funny, a lot of clients who are looking in sort of Vaucluse or Bellevue Hill, it's very rare that they will jump ship to places like Balmain or, even the north. They're generally quite specific on the areas they want to be in because, they have family there, they have friends there, their kids go to school there, and so they're quite focused on those areas. And I think that's where our job becomes even more relevant because there are still deals to be done, and while there might not be as much stock going online, going to auction, there's still going to be people who will sell. And it's all about knowing these vendors and having access to these people and through agents as well, to actually find the people who might sell and then getting access for your buyer.
Can you actually go and knock on a person's door and say, listen, I've got a buyer. Do you want to sell?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you do that?
Absolutely. Generally, we like to keep agents on side. You don't want to go sort of run amok in their area if they know all the vendors. But absolutely, if a client wants a specific property, we will door knock, letterbox drop. We don't leave any stone unturned when it comes to finding them a property. And most of the time agents will kind of know vendors and houses because they might have appraised the property 5 years prior. So you'll speak to a lot of agents who are dominant in that area and see if they can get access for you to any of the houses. But yes, absolutely, door knock and letterbox drop.
So you have to maintain friendship with all the agents, the vendors' agents, and at the same time you have to sort of build that sort of tension up between you and your buyers or your clients. Because you've got to say to your clients, I'm going to do the right thing by you. But at the same time, you can't operate without the vendors, agents as well. So it's a fairly symbiotic relationship between the buyer's agent and the vendor's agent.
Absolutely.
You can't just say this is war and we don't talk to you. You
Yeah.
have to actually have a wall, and it is a wall, but we're quite happy to reach over and talk.
Of course, because that's how deals get done. And often, you know, the seller's agent needs to be present to help condition the vendor on that side.
Yeah.
You know, you sort of need both to work together to find a happy medium.
Tammy, you're a buyer's agent. What's your personal story in terms of buying property?
So my first, purchase of a property was with my husband, was my then boyfriend, but he's a real estate agent, has been for the last 15 years. We bought a little off-market 2-bedroom apartment in Bellevue Hill, a little Art Deco block. It needed work. I think every purchase we have made has been something that needs work. We obviously, you know, renovated that, sold it, and then a few years later bought a, you know, really old terrace in Paddington. It was like a 50-year untouched terrace, which, you know, most people walk through and just find disgusting, but we actually get excited about those properties. I love being able to buy what we call the ugly duckling and then actually spend money and transform it into something amazing.
Is that old story, the worst house in the best street?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, I find like I wouldn't want to pay for someone else's renovation. I'd much prefer to do it myself.
Very interesting.
Although at the moment with building costs and shortage of supplies and shortage of labour, a lot of people are just going for something that's done.
And good enough.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Tammy, good luck in the next release of Lux Listings, but good luck for the next 12 months in what's going to be a really interesting marketplace and really interesting environment. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Mark. Cheers.